Ever stop to wonder why the West seems to hold all the cards, while African nations, despite having the resources, the people, and the will, still struggle to take back their power? Here's the cold, hard truth. It's not by accident. The West plays as a team, with powerful alliances like NATO, the G7, and the EU, while Africa is kept divided, disarmed, and dependent by design. They team up across continents, launching wars, setting the rules of the global economy, and shifting power like pieces on a chessboard. Meanwhile, what do many African leaders do? Some beg for loans. Others try to fight alone. But none dared to form real alliances that could shake the global system until Traore. Now picture this: a young leader from a small West African country, building a network that stretches from Moscow to Havana, Beijing to Bamako. He's even catching attention in places like Denmark and Berlin. He kicks out France, shuts the door on US military deals, bans the export of raw resources, and guess what? His popularity across Africa keeps soaring. The West tried everything to stop him. They poisoned his water, painted him as a dictator, and even allegedly backed a coup. But instead of breaking down, he came back stronger. So what changed? Why are countries from Germany to Cuba now lining up to meet the same man they were trying to silence just months ago? And more importantly, what does this mean for Africa's future? In early April 2025, something happened that flipped the script. Not isolating Burkina Faso, but putting it on the radar of some of the world's most powerful nations. It all started in Washington, D.C., inside the U.S. Capitol. General Michael Langley, head of AFRICOM, stood before the Senate Armed Services Committee. On the surface, it looked like just another routine briefing on Africa. You know, the usual talk about instability and interventions. But this time, something was different. This time, his words lit a fuse that no one saw coming. Langley dropped what sounded like a bombshell, accusing Burkina Faso's transitional president, Captain Ibrahim Traore, of using the country's gold reserves to protect his junta. On the surface, big news. But look a little closer, and it's a familiar move from the Western regime change playbook. Discredit the leader, paint him as corrupt or dangerous, and set the stage for sanctions, media hit jobs, and maybe even military intervention. It's a script we've seen before. Libya, where a storm of lies led to NATO bombing a sovereign nation into ruin. Venezuela, where cries of dictatorship helped justify crippling sanctions. Congo, where foreign-backed chaos keeps the wealth flowing out and the suffering flowing in. And now, they're trying to run that same play on Traore. But this time, the poison didn't take. Because Burkina Faso in 2025 wasn't the same country the West was used to pushing around. Under Traore, the country was transforming, fast. Not just in military terms, but mentally, spiritually. Gold wasn't quietly vanishing into the hands of foreign corporations anymore. It was being refined right there at home. The Burkinabe weren't begging for aid. They were building self-reliance from the ground up. And Traore? He wasn't isolated. He had allies the West never saw coming. The usual media machine expected him to fold, to panic, apologize, maybe soften his stance. But Traore did the opposite. He doubled down. He stood firm on his decision to keep gold in the national treasury. And then he did something even bolder. He called out AFRICOM itself, pointing to its long track record of sparking conflict instead of solving it. And just like that, something snapped in the old colonial system. The West had aimed to discredit one man. Instead, they put a spotlight on an entire movement, one that was rising, spreading across the Sahel, and refusing to be silenced. As Washington scrambled to rally its allies to isolate Burkina Faso, something unexpected happened. Some countries just didn't play along. Instead of condemnation, a very different kind of message came flying in from across the Atlantic. Just days after the failed coup attempt against Traore, Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez landed in Ouagadougou. This wasn't some last-minute PR stunt. It wasn't damage control. His visit was calm, calculated, and packed with meaning. He didn't come to scold. He came to show support, loudly, clearly, and on principle. Rodriguez's visit wasn't just for show, it was revolutionary. He didn't just shake hands and pose for cameras. He brought history with him. He invoked the legacy of Thomas Sankara, a leader whose bond with the Cuban Revolution ran deep. This wasn't about maintaining old alliances, it was about reigniting them. Rodriguez reminded the world that Cuba had always stood with Africa, not for profit, not for resources, but for justice. Back in the 80s, Cuban fighters stood shoulder to shoulder with Angolans, battling apartheid South Africa. And while the World Bank was busy sending loan officers, Cuba was sending doctors, more of them, to more African villages than anyone else. And now, Cuba was standing up again. Not with suits tailored in Paris, not with generals playing puppet for foreign powers, but with a captain, boots dusty from Burkina Faso's red earth. This wasn't about military might, it was about moral clarity. While European leaders argued over whether Traore should be treated as a threat or a partner, Cuba didn't hesitate. They made their choice, boldly and unapologetically. It wasn't just a snub to the West's fear campaign. It was a powerful reminder that Africa doesn't need permission to own its destiny. Rodriguez's visit wasn't filled with vague promises or diplomatic fluff. It came with real, concrete commitments, support for healthcare, energy independence, and a shared vow to protect sovereign dignity. This wasn't just a quiet act of defiance against U.S. dominance. It was something deeper. It was a passing of the torch, from Havana to Ouagadougou, from the legacy of Sankara to the rise of Traore. Two revolutions, one message. Africa's future won't be dictated, it'll be decided. But it didn't stop there. As Traore stood his ground, Europe's response wasn't bold or unified. It was awkward, almost silent. One of the most revealing reactions came from Denmark. Known for its polished diplomacy, Denmark rarely steps out of line when it comes to Western narratives about Africa. And in August 2024, as military governments rose across the Sahel, Denmark quietly shut down its embassies in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. The official excuse: limited capacity to engage, bureaucratic, bland, forgettable. But let's be real, the message was clear. Like many European nations, Denmark wasn't closing embassies out of logistics. It was punishing the region for choosing independence over obedience. Their exit was supposed to send a warning, but in reality, it sent a different message. Europe wasn't walking away in strength, it was walking away in irrelevance. As Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger doubled down, strengthening ties with Russia and China, and winning more support at home, Denmark's move totally backfired. Instead of fading into diplomatic isolation, these countries became the heart of a bold new Pan-African confidence. Then came the real kicker. Just a week after a failed coup attempt in Burkina Faso, one many suspected had foreign involvement, Denmark's special representative, Nugard Marison, and Ambassador Christian Kierkegaard Addinger showed up for a quiet meeting with Burkina Faso's prime minister. No press blitz, no demands. Just a simple, carefully chosen message. We're a small country that makes sovereign decisions, and we respect yours. It was a stunning flip. Denmark never officially admitted it was wrong, but their actions said it all. The embassy that was supposed to shut down, it stayed open. The bridge they meant to burn, they started rebuilding it. It might have been a small move, but the message was huge. Western powers used to calling all the shots were starting to learn a new language: respect. Not because they suddenly wanted to, but because they didn't have a choice anymore. While the West scrambled to adjust, more countries began looking at Traore, not as a rogue troublemaker, but as a blueprint for post-colonial strength. Germany was next. At first, they played the usual game, backing France's condemnations, preaching concern for democracy in the Sahel. But that narrative started to crack when reality hit. Behind closed doors in Berlin, worries were growing. The West was losing its grip, and Africa wasn't waiting for anyone's permission. Then came the surprise twist. In a move that caught even the experts off guard, Germany's development minister, Svenja Schulze, showed up in Ouagadougou, not to lecture, but to listen. In her carefully chosen words, she summed up the shifting reality. Most people in the world live under non-democratic governments, Germany has no choice but to deal with that reality. That one line? It said everything about how the game was changing. This wasn't just an awkward admission. It was basically Germany throwing in the towel. A country that once bragged about tying aid to democratic values suddenly found itself sitting down with a government it had labeled illegitimate just months before. Why? Because Berlin faced a tough truth. If they didn't engage Traore, someone else, Russia, China, even Cuba, would jump at the chance. Schulz's visit didn't come with big headlines or flashy announcements, but the message was huge. For decades, Europe set the rules. Now, they were moving to Africa's rhythm. It wasn't about liking Traore. It was about accepting that he's here to stay, and Germany couldn't afford to be left out. Right at the heart of this diplomatic whirlwind is a leader who's flipping the script on what African presidents are supposed to do. Captain Ibrahim Traore doesn't charm Western capitals. He doesn't beg for loans. And forget those carefully scripted press statements written by foreign consultants. He's all about raw, unfiltered clarity. Burkina Faso will rise, but on its own terms. This is the core of what you can call the Traore doctrine: sovereignty without compromise. For too long, African leaders were praised for playing by Western rules, signing off on one-sided trade deals, hosting foreign military bases, and letting their national banks get tied to European treasuries. They got pats on the back, security deals, and glowing headlines in Western media. But what did their people actually get? Debt, dependency, decline. Traore smashed that old mold wide open. When he kicked out French troops, it wasn't just about security, it was about reclaiming dignity. When he said no to IMF loans, it wasn't just an economic move, it was breaking free from financial chains. And when he reached out to Cuba and Russia, it wasn't about ideology, it was straight-up pragmatism in a world where there are real alternatives to the West. But here's the thing, Traore isn't reckless. Every move is calculated and backed by strong support at home. Every speech channels the spirit of Sankara. Every policy, from pushing food sovereignty to nationalizing gold to restructuring the military, has one clear goal: make Burkina Faso impossible to control from the outside and unbreakable from within. His rule is pretty straightforward, but honestly, kind of revolutionary. If you're gonna come to us, come with respect, come as equals and bring peace. But if you're here to boss us around, don't bother showing up at all. Now here's the real kicker. The West just can't handle the fact that it's lost its grip on Africa. That's the secret every general, ambassador, and think tank is too scared to admit out loud. The old monopoly, it's shattered, and honestly, they have no clue how to deal with it. So when AFRICOM's General Langley called Traore a threat, it wasn't because the guy committed war crimes or brutalized his own people. Nah, it was because Traore flat out refused to play their game. He ignored calls from Paris, didn't bother flashing fake smiles for Washington, and most dangerously of all, he was winning over hearts, not just in Burkina Faso, but all across Africa. What really freaks out Western policymakers isn't that they can't control Traore. Nope, it's that they can't make another guy like him. They can't fake that kind of legit power. Not with money, not with fancy media campaigns, not with all their so-called soft power. Because here's the thing, Traore isn't propped up by big institutions or fancy organizations. He's backed by one thing they just can't buy or build: real people. So what do you think? Can the West actually survive Africa's awakening? Can NATO hang on to a continent it's clearly losing control over? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What happens if more African countries start following Burkina Faso's lead instead of the IMF's playbook? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget, history is watching. And if you want more videos like this, stories about African leaders who are breaking the mold and pushing the continent forward, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you don't miss a thing. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay sharp, stay aware, and stay with us.